live after the Minnesota Timberwolves defeated the Oklahoma City Thunder in the season opener by a final score of 115-108 behind a huge game from Rudy Gobert in his Timberwolves debut. It's time for Marnie Gellner and I to break it all down and share our key takeaways. The Locked On Wolves postcast starts right now.
You are Locked On Wolves postcast, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is the postgame podcast. I'm very excited to be joined by Marnie Gellner of Bally Sports North. Marnie, of course, has covered the Wolves and the Lynx for many years. We're fortunate to have her on the Locked On Wolves postcast this year. Marty, let's get right into it. The Timberwolves ended up winning. It was an up and down opening night, to be sure. The Timberwolves were up big early. They led by 13 at halftime, had a really rough third quarter and kind of a topsy-turvy sort of fourth quarter before eventually they put it away. What's your biggest takeaway from what ended up being a 7-point opening night win?
Well, Ben, it was not pretty. I mean, we'll just start there. The bottom line, you got to win. They're 1-0. Okay, so we can start there and acknowledge that. But I think it's also important to great for a lot of the game, especially the third quarter. There were a few boos at Target Center. It was kind of shocking to see the OKC end up being a 14-0 run. 14-0 in the third quarter. The Wolves, and that wasn't it. It wasn't like once they ended the run, then the Wolves went back up by 15. It was the entire remainder of the game throughout the entire fourth quarter. And that's granted, it's one game. But it was the night when Karl-Anthony Towns didn't play that well, but Rudy Gobert played really well and impacted the game, every facet of the game. So that's probably my biggest takeaway is that is really, really good. And we've seen it. We've seen it a lot as Wolves fans against him. So it was just kind of wait and see what that actually looks like. We saw it and we found out, yep, we're going to be all right.
Yeah, I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards combined to shoot only 6 of 27 in this game. And Rudy Gobert, and we'll talk a little bit more about Jaden McDaniels as well. Those were the guys that kind of got it done for the Wolves in this one. D'Angelo Russell had a pretty good game as well. But yeah, it was all up to Rudy Gobert. He had 23 and 16 in this game. Did it on both ends of the floor. I think he only had a couple of blocks ultimately in the box score, but actually only one block, but he affected probably another half dozen to 10 shots in the game. And it was just incredible to see that, up close in a Timberwolves uniform, the same thing he's been doing in Utah for several years. And he was clearly the best player on the floor in this game overall.
Yeah, he was. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a really good player for really lit things up, especially in the third. So give him his flowers. But Rudy, so many things that just impact the game that it's not a to say, well, it's not going to show up in the stat sheet. But for example, the final off the missed would it have been Jaden McDaniels at the line in the final.
Yep.
Or no, it was Jaden McDaniels was at the line. Rudy Gobert tipped that ball, kept it. I think it was Mike Muscala that was in front of him, boxing him out, and Rudy just reached higher and got fingertips on it to keep the ball alive. Jaden McDaniels gets the rebound and then kind of pulls it out, and then the point when finally Wolves fans could breathe a sigh of relief. But it was because Rudy basketball, and then how about the way the third quarter ended with a Gobert steal to the court with the clock running down and hits a shot from just inside the 3.0, like at the buzzer.
Yeah.
After a terrible Wolves third quarter, was a standing ovation from Wolves fans and everybody high-fiving and slapping it. It was just got flipped on its head in one play, and it was Rudy Gobert at both ends. So it was things like that where he makes a huge impact.
Yeah, there were a bunch of those plays that, like you said, it really is that cliche, like, oh, he does the things that don't show up on the stat sheet or don't show up in the box score. He really does. I mean, all those tipped balls, balls where he's not getting the rebound, balls where he's getting a deflection, but not the steal. And in the example you gave, though, he got both. He got the steal. I don't know how many 22-foot runners we can rely on from Rudy this year, but I mean, that was, like you said this in your first takeaway was, it was a huge Thunder run in the third quarter, 14-0, 19-2, 25-5, however you want to cut it. It was extended, and it's not like the Wolves suddenly came. It kind of felt like eventually, oh, this will snap back. The Wolves will go back up by double figures, but they never led by double figures. I think the final margin of 7, which they got on a dunk with 0.4 seconds left from Jaden McDaniels, they didn't lead. That was their biggest lead after that point. So it's not like it just suddenly, things got back in order. It was kind of a slog during the fourth quarter to really kind of, ultimately win this game. Um, my additional takeaway, so I had similar thoughts to you regarding Rudy. Also, the way that the offense flowed for Minnesota, Karl Anthony Towns was extremely pass happy early in the game. It was almost like he wasn't looking for a shot at all. Like, he had 2 shot attempts at halftime. 4 of his 10 shot attempts were in the fourth quarter, and I think all but 1 were kind of forced. Like, they ran a couple plays for him, but then beyond that, it was like, okay, it's time for me to get my shot. And I think that's part of what, when we saw this last Friday in the last preseason game, the Wolves need to feel out how that's going to work offensively. But I mean, the Towns passing in the first half, it was better than what we've seen. At times Karl has kind of forced things in terms of passing the ball, but the actual, I don't think he had any terrible, crazy cross court passes in the first quarter. They were all legitimately on time, on target, intelligent passes, and the Wolves offense was humming in the first quarter.
The first quarter too, Karl had 7, or he finished the game with 7 assists, and that is the most he's ever had in a first quarter. 5 quarter in his career, but we got a note from Timberwolves PR staff after the first quarter that the highest in a first quarter ever, and I don't think that was just by coincidence. I think you said, Ben, he was looking for his pass. I think he came out with the mindset of, score, I can get my offense when I need it, and that'll maybe be later in the game, and turn Karl tonight. But I think that's what he was thinking. Like, let's get everybody involved. Let's get this thing early and try to get some cohesiveness and get the chemistry going. He finished the game with 7 assists. So to have 5 in the first quarter tells you that he was looking for find his offense after that, because to only have 2 assists in the remaining is not nearly on par with that. But I mean, that Karl does those kinds of things. He's really sort of making a plan like that and following through. He
All right, we lost Marty there. We'll see if we can get back here in a second. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at Prize Picks. They are the title sponsor of today's postcast. Prize Picks is fantastic. If you took Karl Anthony Towns points over tonight, you probably were disappointed. But if you took Rudy Gobert points or rebounds over, you probably had a pretty good night at Prize Picks. How does Prize Picks work? You pick 2 to 5 players and whether or not they'll score more or less points than their Prize Picks projection. And not just points, really. You can pick any category. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. So it's not pro daily fantasy players. You're playing against the projections. You can watch any sport and play the game. That includes NBA, of course, as well as NFL, MLB, college sports, soccer, esports, really anything is over at Prize Picks. Your entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's extremely easy, safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks would give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks gives you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, Marnie, do we have you back?
Let me tell you what happened. I
Okay.
clicked the side button on my phone thinking I was just, and I just kind of did it even not unconsciously. That will disconnect me from you. So here's the thing.
Interesting.
I'm new to this. You, Karl Anthony Towns. I'm Rudy Gobert, just coming into your territory. We're going to have some lumps and bumps. It's chemistry. But I'm not going to click the right side button of my phone anymore because now I know back. It's going to take us a minute, but we're going to get there.
And now we know. I mean, it's the first game for everybody, right?
Yeah. That's
okay.
right.
We're figuring this out on the fly. So here we go. Okay, so a couple last takeaways. I thought this was really interesting. The Timberwolves were actually out rebounded by the Thunder in this game, which it is weird because I went back and looked, and in 4 games against the Thunder last year, the Wolves were, I think, a plus 12 overall on the glass. So not an overwhelming dominant advantage, but they were never out rebounded by the Thunder last season. Yes, the Thunder start Alexei Puksevsky, who's 7'2", but he's not really a center. They played Kenrick Williams at center for long stretches of this game, who's not a center. And yet the Wolves were somehow out rebounded. That's not something we're going to see. I think it felt somewhat fluky, but I think that's one of the reasons the Thunder stayed in this game was second chance points.
Yeah, and that's something that Chris Finch pointed out in his being something that bugged him. And he equated it with physicality and sounding and being out physical. And I think was it a 2 margin? I think it was 57, 55 or something really close like that.
Yep.
That is something we're going with the Northern Lights. We're trying it out. We're workshopping it.
Northern Heights, maybe?
When you're playing.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. When you're and Rudy Gobert together, you have the Northern Heights out there. You don't expect that a team will out-rebound you, a team like OKC. So, yes, a concern, put it on the radar. It will be addressed by Chris Finch in probably tomorrow's practice.
Yeah, and then one last question about Chris Finch post-game. Did he mention at all, I didn't get a chance to catch the post-game presser, did he talk at all about the third quarter, kind of the stagnant offense? Because I think the defense was also lackadaisical in the third quarter, but the first quarter offense, we talked about this already, was humming. The ball was moving around the perimeter. Third quarter felt like just kind of some standing around and then last-minute pick-and-roll action at the end of the clock, the end of the shot clock. Did he address it all third quarter? Was that something that was a concern of his?
I think everything was a concern of his after this game. This demeanor of he's a super cool, chill guy that does not beat around the bush. He tells it like mince words, and that's something I really appreciate about him. And he didn't have great things to say about this game, but he wasn't in a bad mood either. Sometimes we've seen him really frustrated and is a little bit angry, and his voice is raised a little bit. And this one was just kind of like matter good. Karl's got to be more efficient and had good looks for the most part. I think Ant had some, and Finch said those were decent. We'd like him a little better. Just I feel sort of was everything compounding at once. The perfect storm in this game happening at once. And Finch is not happy with bottom line win, first game, lot to work on, all that. He just he didn't really take a stand or did one particular topic, but he definitely wasn't overly pleased with any of it.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, it was like we've identified a pretty sluggish first game overall, not too different from the loss to Brooklyn on Friday in preseason. The difference is it's the regular season, and it's a much inferior opponent to the Nets, and so the Wolves were able to come out with a win, which would explain why Chris Finch wasn't cranky after the game about it, because a win is a win, right? Any final thoughts, Marty, before we sign off for the night?
Just to keep it all in perspective, and the fact that there are so many new pieces, and Rudy Gobert is a massive piece. So anytime you change up significantly, I think you have to expect that it's going to take some time. But the light schedule with opponents the first 6-7 games, so they to trip up and have too many clunkers like they had tonight. I realize it's a win. It's weird. The Wolves got to pick it up, and they've got to play better in order to keep games when they need to start racking them up.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, the next several games, there's some more potential W's in the schedule, but they can't play like this against, I mean, the Thunder almost pulled this one out. So you can't play like this every night, even against teams that aren't supposed to be very good and expect to win every night. So that's all I have for today here on the Postgame Podcast. Thank you, Marty, for joining. We'll, of course, do this after every Timberwolves game this season is the plan. We'll also have a Thursday show and a Friday show this week on the regular Locked On Wolves audio feed. Thanks for watching the Postcast, and we'll catch you next time.